Jack Mitchell, Groin Kick Chronicles, episode 1, and we are looking at games 70 to 61, and I know that you are already flabbergasted at some of the games that are included as the most palatable losses of the last decade.
This was the best we felt. And I'm looking at at least half of these I have specifically intensely painful feelings just looking at them. So
yeah,
this is going to be quite a journey we're about to take, I'm afraid.
It is indeed. Let's go through them. 70, Ohio State's victory over Nebraska in 2021. Number 69, the not so nice loss to Illinois in 2020. 68, 2018 Purdue. Number 67 was Troy in Scott Frost's first year. Number 66 was the 2021 Illinois game. Number 65 was the first game of this whole generation, the 2014 bowl game loss to USC. Number 64 was the 2022 defeat to Purdue, the Trey Palmer game. Number 63 was the Music City Bowl loss to Tennessee. Number 62 was Scott Frost's first loss to Ohio State. And number 61 was the 2022 loss to Illinois, the Casey Thompson injury game is kind of how I remember one. Where shall we begin? And so the plan for all these episodes, probably won't dive into every single loss because we just had about 20 minutes or so of doing so beat by beat. But what stands out to you the most when you're looking at these 10 games?
Yeah, right away, there's a commonality in this group that I see for the majority of them. And that is that the loss, while the game itself, the loss might have been frustrating, painful, even had some of the hallmark of these types of losses, there was still some sort of hope that remained, that the loss didn't change a whole lot. In fact, in some cases, it actually increased the hope. You did not feel despondent about what was next after a lot of these.
Yeah, for sure. Like when you say that, one of the first games that kind of comes to my mind is the 2022 Purdue game that I just mentioned, the Trey Palmer game. I know that you were kind of weirdly depressed that night. We did a post-game show for the I-80 Club, and you were pretty sad about that. But, I mean, they had already fired Scott Frost. They were already in the Mickey Joseph era. For whatever reason, I mean, it was a bummer of a loss because they kind of played well. I mean, the defense did, but Trey Palmer looked awesome that night.
Yeah, the offense looked as explosive as it may have in this entire series, to be honest. Like it was wild, and it was just another. And Nebraska had gotten those wins earlier that year against Rutgers and Indiana, if I recall correctly. But I don't know what it was. If I was still hoping that maybe they had a shot at a bowl game at that time, but there was something. I just wanted that one. I don't know why.
Yeah, the games that stand out to me, it's wild that there are 3 Illinois games in here. And part of that is, and we talked about this in the prologue episode, so I direct people to that, the opponent ranking, Illinois, as annoying as they have become for Nebraska fans, maybe we should have given them a higher score, but they're not like a loss to Minnesota. They're not like a loss to Iowa. They're not like a loss to Wisconsin. And yet, Jack, I mean, each and every one of these games, there's like a searing pain that I can think of. That COVID loss is perhaps my most annoyed that I've ever been at a loss over the last decade. The 2021 loss that they had to them in the season opener, after, remember, all of the changes, all of the things that are happening, all the promise, COVID was what it was. And then they lay the stink bomb. They're getting killed in that game early on. And then the 2022 Illinois loss, oddly enough, Matt Rule's in town for that game. You attended that game.
That's right. Yeah, I was at that game, and they couldn't do anything.
And it was just, horrible offensive performance.
Illinois defense was a bunch of NFL guys, and their quarterback, Danny's son, just did a great job in that one. Yeah, the one that sticks out to me, Josh, like right off the bat as the immediate feel after it was more sick than the bottom 10, the least bad of these is 2021 Illinois for sure for me. Yeah. Like that one sticks out as, I don't know, our formula didn't account for something in that one. And it might just have been, the way the game ended because the moment that we all remember, I think perhaps, is the Cam Taylor-Britt thing on the punt, right?
But that's the first quarter.
Early in the game.
Yeah.
right? But an oh shit moment can come then.
Yeah, it certainly can.
It can.
Yeah, and so one of the things that went for Nebraska, or I guess why this game was maybe tamped down a little bit lower, as we talked about the opponent rating, the max second half win probability for this Illinois loss was just nowhere near, where you needed it to be. And same with the post-game win probability. And so this was a game that Illinois,
wasn't close.
It really wasn't. The final score is not as indicative of the type of game that it actually was.
So why does it feel that way? Well, because you had just, like you had said, you had just come off COVID, right? Nebraska finally has this. COVID was weird for Scott Frost, but he's got a chance to get going again.
Yes.
It was a conference game at the beginning of the year, and so you feel like you're even in a bigger hole. It was another it was a week 0 game, so the entire nation was watching, right? I think all of that played into this, and I think they just looked kind of hapless in a way you probably didn't expect in that game.
Yeah, they certainly did. I definitely think that you're onto something there. I want to not to just stick with Illinois for this entire episode, but that 2020 loss to Illinois, man, is one of those games where it goes sideways for Nebraska immediately. They are massive favorites in that game. They had just picked up that first win over Penn State. I remember I had bet on Nebraska that day. I was like, come on, they get the win over Penn State. They got to be feeling pretty good. They're going to, start playing better football. And immediately they throw a backwards pass that, dude, I've watched that replay like 10 times now for this project. I still always think that it was maybe slightly forward.
I'm sure it was. Weird. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure I thought so.
Meanwhile, Illinois gets it. They go down, they score a touchdown super fast. And that game, it went so poorly for Nebraska in such an instant. And then, the fake punt that Illinois had at the start of the second half as they pick up this goofy first down. As I told the story in the scripted part of this episode, I'm driving to work and I'm hearing Greg and Matt announce it. And I'm like, oh, interesting, a fake punt. I really wouldn't have expected that. Well, then I got to the office and I watched the play because I had overreaction that day. And I see how it happens, and I don't think it was a called fake punt. I just think that the punter recognized that nobody was in front of him.
There's no one within my
run
zip
for a
code.
first down.
Yeah, for sure. But then the similarity between that and the 2021 Illinois game the year later is that, again, to me, the signature play might be that punt return for some people, but it's that first Nebraska offensive play for me.
Yeah.
And the fumble. And right off the bat, that was the thing. And so that happened early in that game, and I think that might have taken it a little bit off the script of kind of how we've established these. And and again, and the other thing and we'll talk about this throughout this podcast, the pandemic games, the 2020 pandemic games are just never quite going to have the same level of heartbreak for whatever reason for me, because it was such a novelty season.
It's a great point. there's the tweet that you have, and people will see it in a future episode where you mention that essentially you're like, all summer long, I just wanted football. And now I just, I don't want to, whatever. I just don't want to watch football anymore. And that season, it was, of all the years, it's kind of a strange one in this whole project, right? Because on one hand, they do have some brutal losses. What do we have only? We only have one game here from 2020. So there's going to be 4 more losses that are going to be a little bit higher. But yeah, I think of the seasons in the last decade, that's the one that I think people are going to perhaps be most understanding for losses. One of the ones, Jack, that I thought was going to be pretty low, and it was when the math spit it out, was that 2018 Ohio State game. That might be, of the last 10 years, that is probably the most moral victory of all of the losses. If we expanded the groin kick era to further and further back, I think of the Big 12 championship loss to Texas, maybe even the national championship loss to Florida State, even though it was for a national title. That 2018 Ohio State game, I don't remember how you felt in that moment, but I know I watched it thinking, they're coming. Scott Frost, he's got Nebraska turned around. And so I think it's very fitting that game is as low as it is.
I'm a little surprised. I didn't expect it to be really high, but just because it was close, you had a couple of late game plays that could have went another way, a ball that could have been thrown better. Wasn't Adrian Martinez had a
backwards fumble,
wild play. Like Nebraska could easily could have won that game. And in retrospect, the difference in trajectory, and this really happens with all those 2018 games, or a bunch of them, where there's a loss, and at the time you're kind of like, man, but it's better than things have looked, so we'll take it. Although, man, missed opportunity, but they ended up stacking up, and now you look back at each one of them, and you're like, wow, what a different direction that might have been had they won that game, and they definitely could have that year against an Ohio State and the end of Urban Meyer's career, basically.
Yeah, the math on that one, why it's so low is because, front to back, Ohio State wins a lot of plays and Nebraska doesn't. Ohio State's a good team, so it's not going to be graded as highly. The only thing, honestly, Jack, that maybe bumps it up to 62 is that it was such a close game that Nebraska only lost by 5 points. If Ohio State wins that one by 12-20, that one actually might be number 70 on this entire list.
I honestly can't believe it's. I would think that would be definitely higher than it is.
Yeah, and speaking of that, the first one that we started with, the lone loss in 2021 that was not by a single score, I cannot believe that the 2021 Ohio State loss was number 70. I figured that one would be a little bit higher because Nebraska played well enough in that game, but again, on a play-by-play basis, Ohio State just kind of dominates and toys with Nebraska a little bit, but there's that really memorable fumble late in the game where if Nebraska's able to get it, they're going to have the ball at midfield down by 6 points with a chance to win the game in Memorial Stadium.
And they got out, if I recall, JoJo Doman had an interception right at the beginning of that game, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, they're just one of those, wait, maybe this is the day the party happens moment. That's another thing. That maybe should have been a groin kick factor, is me thinking about it's going to be the party of the decade tonight, and I imagine it, and how far do you get in imagining it before it's taken away from you? And I definitely had that a little bit during that game because it was Ohio State, right? Yeah. And Nebraska was sticking with them. I don't know if you heard this, they had a lot of close games that year. And that
interesting.
was one of them,
Yeah, interesting. Well, I imagine we'll get to some of those as we roll on. A couple of other 2018 games to talk about. Troy, which had a very memorable post-game show that you did with my radio colleague, John Bishop.
Honestly, all I remember is Andrew Bunch started that game and that post-game show. That's all I remember.
And you sprayed something on your leg?
I thought they were giving me bug spray. It was actually some kind of like industrial spray that goes on the lawn, not on your skin.
How's your skin doing all these years later, by the way?
There's still some problems, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
So that's that one I'm not... That one I'm not surprised, because again, that was so early in Scott Frost's career, and there was sort of the built-in excuse of the injured quarterback.
Of Adrian Martinez. And maybe a game that features the most famous drop that would come out of any of these games, the winnable game against Purdue, which actually ranks behind the Troy game. Purdue at 68, Troy at 67.
That game.
That game was, as I took a look at everything that happened, I had forgotten about how Purdue just, they go down early and then they just kind of run Nebraska off the field. And while Nebraska only loses by 14, the game was really not competitive at any point.
It was not a memorable, fun. There isn't even really a moment for me in that game, and I was there. What I remember about is the weather. It was just cloudy and gray and cold for the time of year when it was happening.
Yeah, that game I definitely think kind of represents the first moment that year where I remember thinking, this really isn't going like I thought it would. The Colorado game, which we'll see quite a bit later on in the series, spoiler alert. The Michigan game, we already talked about the Troy game. Like, all of those games kind of had the built-in excuses. Maybe not so much the Colorado game, but certainly the Troy game with Adrian's injury. And then the Michigan game, they were Michigan, right? But that Purdue loss was the first one where I remember thinking, oh, interesting. That's not what I expected to happen today.
This is something that we thought we'd be getting in year one.
Yeah, indeed. And before we close out, 2 bowl games, the only 2 bowl losses that Nebraska's had in the last decade, because they've only played in, 3 of them or 4 of them, and they won the other 2, including in 2015 and then last year against Boston College. But the Tennessee and USC losses, I think, very much fit in with this group of teams where who cares that you lose to Tennessee? Who cares that you lose to USC? Like, those games, honestly, Jack, both of them, I don't remember like anything about the games, and I was at the USC game. I was in the building in San Diego for that, and I have no recollection of any actual plays.
Here's what I remember about the USC game. Mike Riley was there in the stands.
He walked by me at one point.
And Nebraska wore the surrender whites, and they almost made a crazy comeback, I believe, like at super late at night. This went till 1 o'clock Central Time, if I recall.
I think it was like an 8 o'clock kickoff on the West Coast.
Yeah, it was super late. And then the Tennessee game, I just remember Barnett from the Eagles, just absolutely wrecked Nebraska that entire game. I remember Zach Darlington, I think, going in at quarterback and wearing these super bright red shoes. And again, there was another one where they didn't have a quarterback. I mean, you almost could have built that factor in too as a mitigating factor. Is don't have the starting quarterback, so you kind of expect a loss.
Yeah, and I guess the only game that we really haven't talked about for more than a couple of seconds as we round out the top 10 or the bottom 10, if you were, is that Trey Palmer game against Purdue, where it just kind of came and went. And everybody moved on with their day. I do think that was the night that we realized, wow, they have something in Trey Palmer, and he's going to turn into maybe a really good player. And sure enough, that was a, F it Trey down there somewhere type performance for him.
Yeah, I mean, had some huge plays. Again, about as explosive as the offense looked during this entire time, or at least in terms of big plays.
So that is the bottom 10. How are we feeling? Is this a proper bottom 10, or do you think that there's some games that should be here that are not making an appearance?
It's hard to remember the not bad ones, to be honest. Like, I thought the USC one was one I kind of thought might be up there. The Tennessee one as well, that Troy game. These are all ones that I kind of expected to be in that group. I don't have anything I'm surprised isn't in there. It's more a few that I'm surprised are in there, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, Jack, you have the paper with the next selection of games as we move from 60 to 51. As again, you do not know the rankings for any of these games.
This is the first time I'm seeing them.
So I ask you to now take a look at the games that we'll be taking a gander at on our next episode of the Groin Kick Chronicles as we look from 60 to 51.
There's one that's not. I mean, for me personally, holy cow! No way.
Interesting.
No way. That's way too low.
Okay. I can certainly look at one, Jack. I'll say number 53 is a game that I was pretty surprised was as low as it was, given the team and the kind of game flow of that performance.
That's one of them. That'll be, I think you'll see when we talk about this, there's one of them that there's just some things we can't factor in.
Yeah.
Numerically into the formula.
Absolutely.
I was talking about 56 was the one that made me react.
Yes. How about that?
That was the one that I was reacting to there.
Well, that will be coming up on the next episode of the Groin Kick Chronicles, episode number 2, as we dive into 60 to 51. If you want to check out more stuff, of course, please go to HuskerMax.com. Jack, highlights can be seen on HuskerMax.com. You can see highlights from all these games that we're talking about. You want to take a game? You want to go look at the highlights and watch them?
If this isn't fun enough for you already to fully immerse yourself in the heartbreak that you felt, we can add that visual to it too for you.
And don't forget about the game charts that shows, hey, Nebraska was going to win, and then it really dropped. Though that's probably going to be a little bit later.
I should get you know what? Maybe I should get the top 70, all of the game charts tattooed across my back.
A great idea.
Like a checkerboard, kind of like, ooh, which is that one?
And then people could guess. Oh, is that the
over by that hair there? What's that?
That looks like 2018 Troy.
Yeah, it is,
I was
as a
just
matter of
looking at
fact.
2018
Yeah, it
Troy.
is. It is. Can you scratch right there? Could you scratch me on 2022 Wisconsin a little bit? Yeah, right there. Okay.
Well, that was a lot of pain, and we are just beginning the pain as we get ready to go. Jack, I'm looking forward to another episode of the Groin Kick Chronicles.
I am too.